Welcome back to the Taiwan Outlook. Joining us today is the chairman of the Mainland Affairs Council, Dr. Joseph Wu. Dr. Wu, we talk about the direct flights between the two sides of the Taiwan Strait. Let's move on to other issues. China seems to be, in recent years, pushing for agriculture between the two sides of the Taiwan Strait. And it appears to a lot of people that this is a very good and very tempting approach on the part of Beijing. How do you see the possible cooperation between the two sides on agricultural issues?
Of course, the agricultural cooperation in between the two sides is possible, but I'm doubtful that whether it's going to be beneficial to our agricultural producers. The reason is because Taiwan is already a market economy, and we need to allow the agricultural products to run as a product in a free market economy. And therefore, the products of Taiwan, whether it's agriculture or in other areas, will find their destination, whether that's profitable for them. And so far, the Chinese market is not fully matured. And therefore, even though we have already allowed the Taiwanese products to be exported to China, the agricultural producers in Taiwan are not making a tremendous amount of profit yet. So far, our export has been finding a market like Japan or Canada or Singapore much more profitable than the Chinese market. But we do not rule out further cooperations with the Chinese side. But I think one condition must be realized before that kind of cooperation can be realized. That is the negotiation in between the two sides, in between the agricultural government agencies and the Chinese agencies in charge of agricultural importation. For Taiwanese products to be exported to China, things like quarantine or inspection or tariff or quota, those are the issues involved with the government officials, and we hope that that kind of issues can be negotiated in between the two sides. And so far, there hasn't been no serious negotiation in between the two sides yet.
But as we know that China has reduced unilaterally some tariff levels and so on to make appeal to the people in Taiwan, agriculture sectors. How do you respond to that kind of unilateral action taken by Beijing?
Well, that kind of unilateral actions by Beijing is okay, but the problem is, it's not much of a profit for the Taiwanese agricultural producers. If you look at the amount of Taiwanese fruits exported to China, it amounts only to about 1.3 million US dollars. And with zero tariffs on 16 out of those maybe several dozens of Taiwanese agricultural products exported to China, that's not very much. And the Chinese has also been talking about the fresh vegetables exporting to China will enjoy zero tariff status. But when we examine the amount of Taiwanese vegetables exported to China, it amounts only to 48,000 US dollars. So it's really not much. But in order to safeguard the Taiwanese products because of these kinds of zero tariff situation, for fear of the Taiwanese farmers planting those agricultural products blindly, I think we need to negotiate with the Chinese side on quota so that we can prevent some negative impact on agricultural producers. And another serious impact, what we are afraid of, is that the Taiwanese technological advantage over China is very obvious. And what we are concerned about is in further cooperation in between the two sides on agricultural products, the Chinese might learn from our side, especially from our more advantageous agricultural technology. And if the Chinese side are able to produce the same type of agricultural products with much cheaper prices, then what the government in Taiwan is concerned about is that the Taiwanese agriculture might get wiped out. So it really takes negotiation in between the two sides in order to safeguard the interests of Taiwan farmers.
Are there any regulation right now on preventing Taiwan's agricultural products, technologies from transferring to China?
Oh yes, we have some legal requirements for those people who carry out the seeds or technologies to go to China, but it is very difficult to implement these kinds of regulations. For example, if you carry a pocket of seeds to China, it can easily escape the scrutiny scrutiny of X-rays in either in our airport or seaport. So it's not very easy to do those kinds of things to safeguard our agricultural technology. But the government in Taiwan has been beefing up its security measures to prevent agricultural technology from further flowing to mainland China.
In addition to the agricultural technologies, there are also some concerns about high-tech, like information technology and also semiconductors and so on, being transferred to China. But in recent weeks, the government seems to be liberalizing some of the investment caps and so on. How do you respond to this kind of criticism for government to be proactive or too proactive in liberalizing those investments, restrictions?
Well, the economic issue in any country that has already become a member of the WTO, usually it's just an economic issue. And especially for those market economy, I think we need to allow the market mechanism to take its own place. And by the same token, for any business who wants to seek investment in other countries, in normal situation, we should allow them to seek that kind of opportunities or that kind of possibilities. But the situation in between Taiwan and China is very different from the situation in other normal countries. The Chinese still maintain a high degree of hostility toward Taiwan. And I think the most cited example is that they have already deployed more than 800 short-range missiles targeted Taiwan. And therefore, in dealing with the investment issue that from Taiwan to mainland China, especially on high-tech area, has been one of the prime issues that Taiwan government has been very seriously concerned about. In 2001, the Taiwan government has decided that in the following years, there can be 3 fab producers that can make investment in mainland China. And in 2002, we have already allowed TSMC to make its investment in mainland China on the 8-inch fab. But there has been other 2 applications, and the government has been reviewing those cases in a very careful way. And I think we all understand that the president of Taiwan announced that there has to be a more proactive management type of economic relations between Taiwan and China. And we have been following the advice of the Taiwan government and try to come up with the rules and regulations concerning how to allow the Taiwanese fab producers or high-tech corporations can make investment in mainland China. And I think what we are concerned about is that whether their investment in mainland China is going to endanger Taiwan. So we try to examine whether they are making reciprocal investment in Taiwan. And in the case of the recent announcement of Promos and other factories that are interested in making investment in mainland China, we are sure that they are going to move their order equipment and facilities to mainland China in order to build new factories, more advanced 12-inch fab productions here in Taiwan. So it's in our interest. So in the next 3-4 years, we're going to see Taiwan is probably going to become the largest assembly of the 12-inch fab production in the world. So it's to Taiwan's advantage. And what we are concerned about as well is that the Taiwan employment situation is not going to be endangered because of the investment to mainland China, especially those cases involve so much money. And when we try to examine this issue, what we found is that those factories are actually going to employ more people because they are investing more in Taiwan. They're producing more advanced type of production here in Taiwan. So overall speaking, the reason why the governments allowed those companies to make investment in mainland China because we are sure that those kinds of investment are in Taiwan's interest.
But for some people, if you look at the trading relationship and also investment relationship between the two sides, they are very concerned about Taiwan's over-dependence on the Chinese market. Do you share their concerns?
Oh yes, I'm seriously concerned about that issue as well. And if we look at some of the data representing Taiwan's economic relations with mainland China, we can be very concerned naturally. For example, last year, or I should say 2005, investment from Taiwan to mainland China, it's about 71% of Taiwan's total outbound investment. To a lot of people, that's too much.
That's right.
And if you look at the accumulative amount of Taiwan's investment in mainland China, it's between 120 billion US dollars to 150 billion US dollars. That's the unofficial figure because some of the investment did not go through the government approval process. So that is a lot of Taiwanese investment to mainland China. And if you look at the trade figure, that is also extremely enormous. For example, the export of Taiwan to China for last year is about 40%. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who are concerned that that might become too dependent on the Chinese market. So what the Taiwanese government has been trying to do right now is to tell the Taiwanese businessmen who are interested in making investment abroad, we're trying to tell them that there are other destinations where they can still make money.
But did the government succeed in doing that? Encouraging our business people to invest other places?
In some countries, yes. For example, our investment in Vietnam and our investment in India has been increasing tremendously. But to our disappointment, our investment to mainland China is still growing.
But for the outsiders, people in other countries, they are somewhat confused about the relationship between the two sides. On the one hand, China has now become the #1 export market for Taiwan. But on the other hand, Taiwan has been saying that China is the biggest threat to Taiwan as well. How do we explain away these kind of concerns or confusion on the parts of other countries, decision makers and also business people?
Well, I think that is the dilemma that Taiwan is facing. On the one hand, the Chinese government represent a very serious threat to Taiwan. In addition to the short-range missiles that are targeted Taiwan, they also have all kinds of submarines that deployed along the southeast coastal areas. And those submarines not only threaten Taiwan, but also threaten Japan and other important forces who has a stake in this region. And other than those, the Chinese has also been increasing its military spending tremendously. For this year, it's another 14.7%, in addition to last year's 14.7%. So this kind of threat against Taiwan is real. And other than the threat from the military aspect, the Chinese has also been working very hard in suffocating Taiwan diplomatically, and we all suffer from that. So in this kind of situation, we really need to face up to the threat coming from China. But on the other hand, when we try and think about how we can deal with the circumstances, I think that direct confrontation may not be the best answer to the situation, because arms race or direct confrontation against China may not serve in our interest or the Chinese people's interests or the interests of those people who has a stake in the regional peace and stability. And I think if the two sides can develop a better relations, either through cultural exchanges, educational exchanges, technical exchanges, or more business in between the two sides, maybe there's a chance that the two sides is going to come to better terms with each other. And in the long run, maybe conflict or arms race will become unnecessary.
But are these two strategies confronting with each other? I mean, on the one hand, you are making trades with China, but on the other hand, you are trying to deter China from using force against Taiwan.
Of course, we have two schools of thought on this issue, and it all depends on who is emphasizing in what aspect. Those who are emphasizing on the threat of China, of course, will see the trade in between the two sides or economic relations in between the two sides as not very good policy, because more economic relations in between Taiwan and mainland China is going to make China stronger, so that China will have more resources in pumping into the military area. But for those people who are already doing business with China, they will think that we need to forget about the Chinese threat. We need to concentrate on the economic areas so that the two sides can live peacefully with each other, so that the two sides can have a normal relations. But I think the government in Taiwan cannot fall into one of those two, because one of those extremes might carry Taiwan into a position that may not be in Taiwan's full interest. The Taiwan government needs to balance out all the different arguments with each other in order to come up with a very balanced policy in dealing with mainland China. Yeah,
in addition to trading relations, in addition to agricultural cooperations, there are also some other issues that could be, stricken out on, cooperation between the two sides. And we'll come back and talk about those issues, and also the most important one, the political issues between the two sides of Taiwan Strait. We'll take a short break.